Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine this. You hear this kind of tinny voice, almost robotic, reading out numbers. Pig iron figures, apparently. It just cuts through the quiet in this small, kind of grim room. That's the sound that really hits you first in the material we're looking at today.
Right, the telescreen.
Exactly. The telescreen in Winston's flat. It's always there. You can, turn the brightness down, but you can never actually turn it off. What does that tell you straight away?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? That sound, that lack of choice about silence, it immediately paints this picture of total surveillance. It's not just background noise.
No.
It's about never being truly alone, never having that private space, a constant intrusion.
Precisely. And that feeling that you're always being watched, that's really central to what we're exploring in this deep dive, which, is designed for you, the learner. Our source material today is excerpts from George Orwell's 1984. And our mission really is to get under the skin of this society, understand its core mechanisms. What does it show us about power, control, and, the individual trying to exist within it?
And if you think about it more broadly, power often isn't just about dictating actions. It's about shaping the whole environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even the mundane stuff, the everyday background noise.
So let's step into Winston's world a bit more. He's in this cramped apartment. The telescreen is just humming away.
Yeah.
And even how he looks tells a story described as a smallish, frail figure, kind of lost in those standard blue party overalls. You really feel the hardship mentions of, rough soap, blunt razor blades, always being a bit cold. What kind of picture does that paint for you?
It immediately sets up this stark contrast, I think, between whatever the party says it's achieving, progress and whatnot, and the actual lived reality.
Right.
The individual seems worn down, almost diminished by the very system claiming to build things up.
And then there's the Ministry of Truth, or Minitru in Newspeak, this huge white pyramid building just dominating everything.
Yeah, visually imposing.
A constant reminder of the party's power. And carved on it are those slogans. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. I mean, how do you even start to make sense of that?
Well, those slogans are pure doublethink, aren't they? That's a key party idea, holding two completely contradictory ideas in your head at the same time and believing both. Minitru, the ministry dealing with news, entertainment, history. It basically twists truth into whatever the party needs it to be. It makes reality itself seem unstable, malleable.
And Minitru is just one of four ministries. They all have these Newspeak names that seem deliberately backwards. Minipax, Ministry of Peace.
Which handles war.
Miniluv, Ministry of Love.
Which deals with law and order, essentially through fear and torture.
And Miniplenty, Ministry of Plenty.
Which oversees the economy, even though everything seems scarce. It's a world built on these deliberate contradictions. Why do that? Why flip all the meanings? It's about controlling thought itself. By twisting language, creating newspeak, the party aims to narrow the range of thought. If you don't have the words for rebellion or freedom...
it's harder to even think it.
Exactly. The concepts themselves start to fade.
So in this super-controlled world, Winston does something, doctrinally personal. It's not explicitly illegal according to any written law, but it feels incredibly dangerous. He opens a diary.
Yeah.
And if caught,
yeah,
death or years in a forced labor camp, what does that tell you about how this regime operates?
It shows how arbitrary the power is, doesn't it? The crime isn't breaking a specific rule, it's the detection. It's having an independent thought and independent action. And his choice of that specific diary, creamy paper, using a real pen, that's significant too. It's like a craving for something real, something tangible, in a world that feels increasingly fake.
Totally. You can almost feel him hesitating, picking up that pen. Just making the first mark is called the decisive act. And he writes the date, April 4th, 1984. It's a small thing, but it grounds it, makes it feel very specific and, disturbingly familiar.
That specific date, yeah. It feels like a warning, doesn't it? Not some distant future, but something uncomfortably close to the time Orwell was writing.
Okay, let's shift to O'Brien. He's inner party. Even his clothes, the black overalls, set him apart, create this kind of hush.
Right, signifies status.
Physically, he's imposing, described as burly, strong-looking, but then he has this unexpected charm. There's this moment where he adjusts his glasses, a sort of civilized gesture Winston finds strangely comforting. What's going on there with that contrast?
That contrast makes O'Brien really ambiguous, I think. The imposing figure represents party power, but that little gesture, the hint of civility, suggests maybe intelligence, perhaps even something unorthodox underneath.
Yeah.
And that spark is what Winston latches onto, this desperate hope for connection.
And Winston feels this pull towards him, has this secret hope. It's almost a fantasy that maybe O'Brien isn't a true believer. Maybe he's smart enough to see through it all. But obviously with the telescreen watching constantly, there's no way to know, absolutely no way to check. How does that constant surveillance just poison everything, like trust and connection?
It creates this profound isolation. You can't have real connection if you suspect every word, every glance is being monitored and judged.
Right.
So trust just evaporates. You're left guessing, suspicious.
We see O'Brien during the 2 minutes hate, this daily ritual, this explosion of collective anger. And this scene really shows you how the party channels emotion.
Oh, yeah.
The image of Goldstein, this supposed archenemy, comes on the screen, described with a lean Jewish face, a sheep-like look, a bleeding voice, just spewing this venomous attack on the party. What's the point of this Goldstein figure?
Goldstein is the essential scapegoat, isn't he? He's the target for all the public's frustration, anger, fear. The party directs it all onto him. And his arguments, though framed as evil, often touch on things that might actually worry people, which makes the whole thing weirdly plausible and alarming.
And behind him, you see this image of this endless Eurasian army marching, reinforcing this idea of a constant external enemy.
Yeah, the perpetual war footing.
The hate itself is described as this total frenzy. People are shouting, screaming, losing control. Even O'Brien's face goes red. There's a woman who actually throws a dictionary at the screen. What's the effect of that kind of collective outburst?
The 2 minutes hate is, it's like a pressure valve, but one the party designed and controls. It forces participation, makes everyone share in this hatred. It creates a kind of unity, but it's a unity built on directed fury, not genuine belief necessarily.
What's really striking, though, is how the target of the hate can shift. For Winston, anyway. Once again, it's Goldstein, but then, just for a moment, his hatred flips towards Big Brother, towards the party itself. He even feels a weird kind of sympathy for Goldstein. What does that conflict show us?
That internal flicker is really important. It shows a party hasn't completely stamped out individual thought or feeling. Even in the middle of this forced ritual, Winston's own mind is still working, still capable of, well, subversive feelings.
And then we see Winston's own act of rebellion. Yeah. Small, almost fetal. He just scrawls "down with Big Brother" over and over in the diary. And it triggers this huge panic in him, even though just starting the diary was probably just as dangerous. Why the sudden terror?
Because writing it down makes it concrete. It's a conscious act of defiance, even if only he sees it. The panic shows how deeply ingrained the fear is, the knowledge that surveillance is total or feels total.
Yeah, he gets it then. Thought crime. That's the real crime. And you can't hide it forever. He thinks, whether he writes it down or not, the thought police will get him eventually. What's so insidious about that idea? Thought crime.
Oh, it's central to the control. It goes beyond just policing what people do. It aims to police what they think. It criminalizes dissent right at the source, inside your own head.
And the party's influence, it seeps into everything. Even the most mundane things, like his neighbor, Mrs. Parsons, asks for help with a blocked sink. Just a totally normal, everyday problem.
Right.
But even the way they're meant to talk comrade, not Mrs., it's all part of it.
And that little detail, the blocked sink, the general decay of the Victory Mansions building, it suggests the party's focus isn't really on people's actual well-being, is it? The infrastructure's crumbling.
Yeah.
Plus, the language policing, even if it's not always enforced perfectly, it shows the desire to control every little interaction.
And the building itself, Victory Mansions, is falling apart. It reflects this general neglect.
Yeah.
Then you meet the Parsons children, these terrifyingly enthusiastic little spies in their uniforms.
Yeah.
Playing this game where they accuse Winston of being a traitor, a thought criminal, pointing a toy gun at him. What is so disturbing about these kids?
The children are maybe the most chilling part. They're completely indoctrinated. They embody the party's success in breeding suspicion and loyalty from the absolute earliest age. Their game isn't just a game. It mirrors the state's apparatus of control. It blurs that line between childhood and, well, fanaticism. It really unnerves Winston, understandably.
And this unease, it gets into his dreams, his memories. He keeps having this dream about a voice saying, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness."
Yeah.
And he connects it, weirdly, to O'Brien. What do you think that signifies?
That dream, It's ambiguous, isn't it? It hints at some future meeting, maybe hope, maybe danger. No darkness could mean enlightenment, or it could mean interrogation lights. And linking it to O'Brien, this powerful inner-party figure, just adds layers of mystery, and for Winston, this deep yearning for someone, anyone who might understand.
He also dreams about the dark-haired girl. In the dream, she tears off her clothes in this field. He sees it as this powerful, beautiful act of rebellion, a connection to some lost natural past. And it ends with the word Shakespeare. Why that word?
Shakespeare represents everything the party wants to destroy, doesn't he? Complex human emotion, art, history, intellectual freedom, beauty. It's all bundled up in that one name. The dream is like his subconscious screaming for freedom, for authenticity, a purely mental rebellion.
And the contrast is so stark when you see him having to do the party's mandatory exercises, the physical jerks. He hates them.
Understandably. Forced conformity.
And it's while he's doing this, gritting his teeth, that he thinks about how the party just rewrites history constantly. How deep does that manipulation actually go?
Oh, it's total. The exercises control the body, the history rewriting controls the mind, the party erases and rebuilds the past to suit whatever they need now, so the only record left is individual memory, and they're trying to make that unreliable too.
He can't even remember for sure when he first heard of Big Brother. The party histories just keep pushing his role further back, making him the leader from the very start, inventing heroic deeds, even fabricating this whole narrative about evil capitalists and top hats being the enemy before the revolution. What's the point of all that constant rewriting?
It makes it impossible to establish any objective truth. If the official story keeps changing, even your own memories start to feel shaky.
Yeah.
You become totally dependent on the party for what's real, what happened. It creates this massive disorientation.
He remembers the party claiming they invented airplanes.
Yeah.
He knows from his childhood that's not true, but there's no way to prove it. Nothing exists to contradict them, except once. Once he actually held real documentary proof that the party had lied about something specific. But what happened with that?
That one piece of concrete evidence, it just highlights how systematic the lying is. And the fact that even having proof doesn't matter in the long run, because the past itself is constantly being changed, it shows the terrifying power they have to just reshape reality.
Which brings us right to his job, Ministry of Truth. He's got his speak-right machine, these pneumatic tubes sending messages, even tubes for waste paper, the memory holes where inconvenient documents just vanish. And his actual task is to rectify. That's the word they use, historical errors and old copies of the Times. What does rectify really mean here?
Rectify means falsify. He's literally creating the lies. His job is the engine driving the party's control of the past. He takes old news reports, old speeches, and changes them to match whatever the party line is today.
So if Big Brother made some prediction and it turned out wrong,
Winston finds the original report and rewrites the prediction so it matches what actually happened, or he adjusts production figures after the fact. It's endless.
A constant cycle of altering newspapers, books, films, photos, everything, to make sure the party's narrative is always consistent, always right. What's the cumulative effect of doing that day in, day out?
It means the party is always infallible, always wise, always correct. It builds this image of unwavering authority. How can you question a party that has never, ever been wrong, according to the official record?
The records department itself is described as huge. Its only job is finding and destroying any scrap of paper, any film, that contradicts the current version of events. And they use these bland euphemisms, slips, errors, misprints, or misquotations to cover up the fact that it's just mass forgery on an industrial scale. What does that tell you about the sheer size of this operation?
The scale is mind-boggling. It shows how vital controlling history is to the party. They pour immense resources into it. Because controlling the past is how you control the present and therefore the future.
But Minitrue isn't just about the past, is it? It provides everything, all news, all education, all entertainment for everyone in Oceania.
Right, total information control.
And there are separate departments just churning out stuff for the proles, the working class. Like really sensational newspapers, trashy little novels, simple films, sentimental songs made by a machine called a versificator.
Distraction.
And then there's this mysterious section called pornosec. What's the thinking behind splitting the content like that? Party members get one thing, poles get another.
It shows the party understands its audience in a cynical way. The Prola feed is designed to be simple, distracting, emotionally manipulative, but politically harmless. Keep them entertained, keep them uninterested in real power. It's a way of managing them.
And the consequences, if you fall out of favor, they're brutal
Yeah.
and sudden. We hear about an organization, the FFCC, and one of its leaders, Withers, just dissolving, vanishing.
Oh.
Public trials are apparently rare. Much more common is vaporization. You just cease to exist. This is the psychological effect of knowing that could happen to anyone, anytime.
It creates this constant underlying terror. There's no process, no appeal. You can just be erased. It sends the clearest possible message: don't step out of line, not even in your thoughts, because no one is safe.
Winston knows people, well, lots of people apparently, who've just disappeared. He sees this note on a work document, refs unpersons, referring to Withers, which means he's already gone, wiped from the record.
Officially never existed.
And Winston just accepts it. He understands these purges, these disappearances, are just how the government works. How do people even function with that level of fear just woven into daily life?
It's chilling, isn't it, that acceptance? It shows how effective the terror is, how deeply the fear is internalized. Individual lives become completely expendable for the sake of the party's stability, or perceived stability. Society runs on fear.
Winston had this dark feeling about his colleague Syme. He thinks Syme is too smart, talks too much about Newspeak principles. He's convinced Syme will be vaporized eventually.
Yeah, intelligence itself becomes dangerous.
Meanwhile, the telescreen keeps blaring propaganda. There's this example about the chocolate ration being reduced, but the announcement claims it's being increased, and people seem to accept it. How does that constant barrage work so well?
Syme's likely fate shows the party fears intelligence it can't control. And the chocolate ration. That's doublethink in action. It perfectly shows how they manipulate perception, create an alternate reality, and rely on people either believing it or forcing themselves to believe it, even over something tangible like chocolate.
He sees this self-deception, this doublethink everywhere. Not just party members, but even the proles seem to swallow it sometimes. And this awful question starts bothering him. Is he the only one left with a real memory?
Mm-hmm. The ultimate isolation.
And then there's the dark-haired girl again, watching him intently. It fuels his paranoia. Is she a spy? Part of the thought police? What does that kind of constant suspicion and isolation do to your grip on reality?
It erodes it completely. Being potentially the only one who remembers the true past makes you question your own sanity. Am I crazy? Did it really happen? And the girl's stare just embodies that ever-present threat. Surveillance, betrayal, it could come from anywhere.
He feels this desperate need for some kind of real connection, something authentic. So he wanders into the prole district. It feels different there, less rigid than the party world.
Yeah, a bit more life, maybe. More chaos.
And he sees this prole woman singing in a basement kitchen. He's drawn to her vitality. He sees her almost as a symbol of rebellion against the party's attempt to control sex, relationships, everything personal. What is it about the proles that gives him this flicker of hope?
Well, the proles, despite the poverty and lack of education, seem less directly managed, less psychologically manipulated by the party, maybe. Winston sees this raw humanity, this potential for genuine feeling and connection that seems stamped out among party members. His attraction to the woman is like a visceral no to the party's cold puritanism.
He thinks about his own wife, Catherine. Their marriage was totally joyless. Sex was just a duty to the party. Another example of how the party demands all loyalty, all emotional energy be directed towards Big Brother. They push this idea that chastity and party loyalty are linked. Why try and suppress something so fundamental?
Because love, desire, family loyalty, these are powerful forces. They create bonds and allegiances outside of the party's control.
Right, potential rivals for devotion.
Exactly. So the party tries to channel all that energy, all that devotion towards itself and Big Brother, leaving personal relationships cold and functional, if they exist at all.
Winston finds himself wanting to shatter that wall of virtue, as he calls it, with Catherine. He knows that just wanting real intimacy, real desire, is basically thought crime. He also remembers seeing old anti-capitalist propaganda cartoons of rich men exploiting workers and thinking, ironically, it was probably true. How does the party play with these old narratives?
It's pure cynicism. They use whatever narrative serves them now. They'll demonize the past using the party's own version of history, or they'll selectively use elements of pre-revolutionary critiques if it reinforces their current message. The goal is always just maintaining control, keeping people focused on designated enemies.
He remembers finding that photograph. Proof that 3 executed revolutionaries, Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, had been somewhere else entirely when they supposedly committed their crimes. Tangible evidence the party had fabricated their confessions.
A smoking gun.
Yeah, and he tried to hide it, but eventually had to destroy it in a memory hole. But just having held it, even for a few seconds, felt incredibly important to him. Why cling so hard to that lost proof?
Because it was real. In a world of constant lies and shifting realities, that photo was a moment of absolute, undeniable truth. It proved the party lied, fundamentally. Holding it anchored him, however briefly, to something solid, even after it was gone.
But the past is always changing, so evidence like that becomes meaningless almost instantly. And Winston starts to wonder, what's the real reason? What's the ultimate goal behind all this endless falsification?
It's more than just covering up mistakes or inconsistencies. It seems to be about achieving absolute control over reality itself, over human consciousness. If you control the past, you dictate the narrative of the present, and you own the future. It's about power in its purest, most absolute form, power over thought.
He gets this feeling, almost subconscious, that he's writing the diary for O'Brien. Like O'Brien's the only one who might understand.
That desperate search for connection again.
Even though the party demands you reject everything you see and hear if it contradicts them, what's the point of denying basic objective reality like that?
It's the final stage of submission, isn't it? If they can make you deny the evidence of your own senses, then they control everything. Your mind is completely theirs. There's no independent ground left to stand on.
But despite everything, Winston holds on to this basic idea. Truisms are true. 2 + 2 = 4. Gravity exists. A solid reality is out there. And his hope, however thin it seems, even to him, lies with the proles. Why them? It seems almost absurd when he looks at their lives.
It does seem absurd, and he knows it. But it comes down to numbers, maybe? And the fact that the proles haven't been subjected to the same intense psychological conditioning as party members. He clings to this idea that their basic humanity, their sheer life force, might hold some untapped potential for rebellion, even if they're politically unaware now.
He tries talking to an old man in a pub, trying to get a sense of what life was really like before the revolution. But it's useless. The old man's memory is just fragments, anecdotes. He can't even clearly remember basic things like what a pint of beer used to be like.
Yeah.
It just shows how successful the party has been at erasing the past, not just from documents, but from people's minds. What does that loss of collective memory mean for a society?
It's devastating. Without a reliable connection to the past, there's no benchmark, no way to compare the present. The party can claim anything, that life is better now, that they've achieved miracles, and there's no collective memory to contradict them effectively.
Winston's just left frustrated. The party's narrative of constant improvement goes unchallenged because genuine memory is fading. Their conversation touches on old London landmarks, bits of forgotten nursery rhymes, just these tiny echoes of a culture being wiped out. What's the significance of those little cultural fragments?
Those fragments, the rhymes, the names of places, they're like little points of resistance, aren't they? Tiny connections to a time before the party's total control. They represent shared culture, history, identity, all the things the party wants to erase and replace with itself.
He keeps thinking about getting caught, the inevitability of it, for thought crime. Confession seems certain, and that thought keeps coming back. Meeting O'Brien in the place where there is no darkness.
That ominous phrase again.
And right at the end of these excerpts, he gets this note slipped into his hand from the dark-haired girl. And he's torn, absolutely torn between two possibilities. It's the thought police setting a trap, or could it possibly be the Brotherhood, the mythical resistance? What does that final moment, that note, represent?
That note is pure suspense, isn't it? It crystallizes his entire predicament. The overwhelming danger versus the faintest, almost unimaginable sliver of hope. It leaves him and us on this knife edge, facing these two extreme possibilities, utter destruction or a potential path to rebellion.
So wrapping up this deep dive into these extracts from 1984, what we've seen is a society just saturated with surveillance, where truth is constantly manipulated, where individual thought and memory are actively suppressed.
Yeah, the party's control feels total, shaping reality itself. And Winston is right on that edge, starting to rebel, but also deeply afraid, clinging to bits of the past and these tiny, fragile hopes.
What really stands out is just how effective these methods of control seem to be. The language manipulation, the organized hatred, the rewriting of history.
Exactly. It's all meticulously designed to maintain power and crush dissent. I think the real aha moments for you, listening, come from spotting those mechanisms, seeing how they work, and thinking about, well, how they could potentially undermine individual freedom and twist a society.
Definitely. And these excerpts, they just give us a glimpse, really. It's a complex, deeply unsettling world Orwell created, with so many layers still to explore.
Which maybe leads to a final thought for you to take away. In our own world, with information coming at us constantly, from everywhere, what kinds of subtle forces might be shaping our understanding? of the past, of the present? And maybe more importantly, how can we actively work on our own critical thinking to try and tell the difference between genuine information and, well, manipulation?